Over the last 2 weeks, you've heard the same scripture, which I'm going to do again today. It is from Isaiah. For unto us a child is given, unto us, I can't read it. You read it.
To us a son is given, and the government
Will be upon his shoulders. And
his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
thank you. Last 2 weeks, the wonder child has been the counselor. We've seen that wonder child as our counselor, as mighty God. God that does not cause the conflicts in our lives and in the world, but stands behind us, seeking for us to rise above, to be victorious. And then today, as we lit the candle for love, we speak of that wonder child as everlasting Father. Now that's a puzzlement, as the king of Siam would have said, is it not? We talk about this spiritual growth that we are seeking to go through in our lives. And here at this time of year, Advent, seeking to come to that greater awareness of that divinity within us. We call it growth in consciousness, right? Growth in consciousness, I could say it's simply seeing something you haven't seen before, but looking at the same place. In other words, looking at yourself and seeing an aspect of yourself that is higher, that is greater than you have seen before. Looking at some part of your life and seeing it from a higher level, a different perspective. I've quoted my beloved teacher and friend, Ed Rabel, the man who chased me down in the hallway at Unity School and said he heard about me wanting to open this place, and then he reached out and hugged me, and Ed Rabel did not hug anybody. 2 years in school, I had never hugged Ed Rabel. I was afraid to. Yeah, Ed Rabel used to say, you can't change a situation from the same level of consciousness that caused it. You can't change a situation in your life when you continue to think and see the thing in the same way, in the same limited way, same human way. Now, I think both poets, scientists, they sort of have a hand into this thing of looking at things and trying to see them from a different way. I remember one day I had done a retreat program with Jim Freeman. Now, I love Jim Freeman. There are those who did, and there were those who didn't. I love Jim Freeman. And one day we were backstage at the Activity Center at Unity Village. And, of course, I had played for the retreat department, played music. So in our conversation, he looked over and he said, Greg, you're an artist. You understand me. The people here, meaning management, they don't understand me. And that's that aspect of the scientist and the poet expanding consciousness, looking at the same stuff in a different way. The scientist's poems, you know what a scientist's poems are, don't you? The formulas and the equations that he works with. But then a poet has theorems. His rhymes and the word images he creates. Now, both do their best work when they rise to a level of consciousness or awareness where they see things that we see regularly totally differently, from a higher point of view. And when they are in that space, their clarity of vision and their clarity of thought replaces all the effort, the struggle of trying to find, trying to create. You can sit at a desk or a piano and say, well, I've got to crank out a song. I've got 20 minutes to do that. And that's hard. That's very hard. And I will guarantee you it's likely not to be inspired. But when you have that moment of absolute brilliance, when I mean the brilliant light of God shines in your mind, a whole different thing happens. In conservatory in Cincinnati, in my music history class, we got to see some of the original manuscripts of Mozart. I'm talking about first drafts. Symphony, I mean, they write symphony parts beginning with, well, flutes and working woodwinds and then the strings, and it's a whole page, and conductor is reading lots of lines, lots of parts at one time. His first drafts looked like final copies. We learned in music history that he would sit at the paper and the notes would come out of the end of his pen. Now, that is a shift of consciousness into another level where it comes through you. And as Jesus said, it is not I, but the Father within who performs the works. Now, I think there's both poetry and science in learning to see a father where we'd normally see a child. Sue and I were at Costco in the last week, probably more than once. And they had a nativity set that was pretty good size, not life size, but pretty good size. And the infant was in the manger, and I picked up the infant. The infant was about that big, and I turned to Sue. I said, "Do you know many churches insure the baby in the manger? Insure them. Many of them get stolen. And what a great prank. Steal baby Jesus for Christmas." Yeah. Seeing that wonder child as father. Now, that's both poetry and science. But then, seeing a child where we would normally see a father. It's a different juxtaposition. The divine child in you, yes, wonderful counselor, yes, mighty God, but also everlasting Father. Everlasting. I think we have an idea what that means, don't we? It's like the biggest jawbreaker you ever saw in your life. Eternal, continual, perpetual, durable, immovable. That's that everlasting. But the Father, we're so used to the idea of God as a patriarch, as daddy, You know, when Rocco Errico teaches from the Aramaic, if I remember correctly, when he runs across the term Abba, Father, does he not say it's the equivalent of daddy? Daddy. As the child looking to the parent, we see that. But then, Father, Eric Butterworth, I had an interesting perception, and I'd like to borrow from that. He spoke about desire. Perhaps you've run across his words on the idea of desire. Emily Cady said, desire in your heart is God tapping on it, saying, what you desire, this thing is already prepared for you. In other words, you have the desire. God is telling you, it is. It's yours. It's here. It's here now. What Butterworth did was look at that word desire and see it as from the Old French, de, of, and sire, the Father, of the Father. The desire comes from the Father, and ultimately, the desire that comes through the wonder child is for the Father. What do I mean by that? Well, over the years, I've said to you and others who have been here on a Sunday, you may think you desire a new car. And that's fine and good. But ultimately, that desire for a new car is the desire for more God or good God in your life. You think you may desire this or that. All of the physical things we desire, where do they come from? They come from God. The divine idea, the desire to have them, comes from the Father. To have the desire is God telling you it's there for you. So, everlasting Father, what does that mean? That means that eternally, perpetually, always, our desire, ultimate desire, is for a greater awareness of the presence of God. The wonder child awakens that desire within us. Not only awakens, but seeks to fulfill it too. Now, that wonder child is always within you. It's always there in the background. Sometimes it's doing its work pretty plainly, and other times its work is hidden. Sometimes we want to tell it, go away for a while. There are things you don't want the wonder child to see, I'm sure. That wonder child within you is the never-ending, perpetual desire within. And it is that sustained desire for a greater awareness of the presence of God. I think it must have been Butterworth again who said, in Unity, we are in the express business. Have you heard that before? Our work in this business is the expression of God. Pressing out more of God in our lives. In other words, coming to a greater awareness of that divine presence and then radiating it, living it, being it. I know in my life I've been many things. And Once I was, whether you believe it or not, a little child. I think I came into this world at 7 pounds, 6.5 ounces. Is that big?
It's good.
It's good?
That's average. Very
Average? Didn't stay there. Not for long, anyway. But that may be a good thing. But the person I am now and the infant I was then, they're connected, they're hooked together. Consciousness is the same, only expanded, greater. It sees now the world from a far different perspective. The personhood of each one of us could be described, if you will, through our list of desires. What we'd like to experience in this life. And that desire list changes as we become more open to the presence of God. You know, early on, Christmas, I want to go sit on Santa's lap. I can tell you exactly when the last time I sat on Santa's lap. I was 19. At a J.J. Newberry.
How much did you weigh then?
Oh, I don't know. Not as much as Santa. And I do remember aldehydes, alcohol breath. And I asked Santa for a Corvette. Your question was? Yeah, that was your question, right?
Yeah.
Did you get it? Yes.
Yeah.
My aunt, Christmas morning, handed me a package. It's about that size. It was a red Corvette. I didn't fit in it, but then nobody did. But I got my Corvette. What I would ask Santa for this year is very different. An even greater awareness of that divine presence. Seeing the light more clearly than ever before in each one of us. My desires have grown. Seeing my life, my world, my Christmas. The same thing that I was looking at back then, but from a whole different point of view. That's growth in consciousness. That divine child in you is Father, everlasting Father, and that is the desire in your heart. And that desire is the Father of your experience. You desire, and you desire intensely enough. And with the faith, what happens? Well, I can point out in this building a few desires of my heart that began as desires, and anyone at the time would have said to me, there is no way, and this is a technical term, in hell, that's a technical term, preachers have to know about hell. There's no way in hell you can get that. Has anybody ever told you that? You've seen the piano on the stage, and many of you know that it spent time with Arthur Rubinstein, the concert artist back in the 60s, and New York at Carnegie Hall. And I don't know, somebody asked me last night what the replacement was, and I haven't looked in a number of years. Last replacement value for that thing was $115,000. And when I bought it, you would have said, there is no way in. But it happened. And it happened before even I made things possible for it to be. I mean, I had seen it, I had desired it, I had put a picture up in my kitchen of it, and when it was offered to me, I chuckled and walked away because I didn't believe it. And then that night I called the Steinway dealer, the salesman I had talked to. I called everyone in the phone book in Cincinnati who had his name so that I could say, you told me it would be for sale, and I'm asking you to call me first. Van Cliburn had always wanted to buy it. They called me first. I sold my car. I took buses. I had a mortgage. I had to do a loan on it for 5 years to pay it off at that time. But it happened. There's a clock sitting out in the hall. I saw that clock, the grandfather out there, and I wanted that clock. I desired that clock. And it's been with me since 1966. You know. That can work sometimes in the negative for you. My friend Marion, who got me into Unity, she once had a desire for companionship. And then this person came along and she said, Greg, how do I get rid of him? Change your mind, Marion. The desire in our heart, when we begin to see that desire, that Father, desire of the Father within us from a universal point of view, it becomes that everlasting, unending desire for greater good. And good is another name for God. Remember, what's her face? Hopkins? My good is my, and my God, yes, they're interchangeable. So you begin to have that enduring desire for greater good or greater God in your life. Malachi said, have we not all one Father? Translate that according to what I've said. One desire, which is for God, good in our lives. Jesus said, no man cometh unto me except the Father hath sent him. Desire. It is that desire from God that opens you to seek that Christ in you, that divine spirit in you. The Father, that desire of God working or abiding in me, does the work. As we nurture it, hold on to it. Desire of God, for God, by God. By God. Yeah. Yeah. How many times have you looked at the little child lying there in a manger? It's only a baby. So the Father reduces itself to that little infant you were. Comes into the world with you because it's within you. For the Father comes through you as your desire stream. And sometimes what you think is a minor or unimportant or trivial desire may be the most amazing thing in the world. That little baby, how powerful that little infant is, but how easy it has been for us to overlook and to relegate it to infancy. We keep it small. We keep it quiet. It's time to remember, folks, that wonderful Counselor, that mighty God, that everlasting Father that is within you. And that everlasting Father being your desire to experience an even greater awareness of God's presence in your life, your mind, your heart, in all that concerns you. I have an affirmation that I wanted to use today. I have an immovable desire to live, move, and have my being in conscious union with God, the infinite good. See the connection?